think one of the things that would be most surprising if people were to walk through and see the students, because it's always inspiring to see the faces of the students and their pride, but also folks would notice they're non-traditional students. You have this idea when you're talking about higher education, these are 18-year-olds coming right out of high school. For a trade school, often these are people who've tried something else. These are single moms that are trying to make things better for their family. They're veterans returning to the workforce. They're people who've been downsized, maybe lost their job because of AI, just unhappy with their career trajectory, going through a divorce and need to get into the workforce, whatever it might be. You'll notice these are adult students for the most part, and they're non-traditional. And often they are coming from a socioeconomic background where they need help.
Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast focused on incredibly talented people who've dedicated themselves to public service when their country and communities needed it the most. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox-Bolton of the New Deal, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. The New Deal is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. Check out newdealleaders.org to find out more.
Today, I'm thrilled to talk to former Congressman Jason Altmire and Riley Burr, co-authors of the new book, Trade Up: Why the Future Belongs to Skilled Workers and How Career Education is Transforming the Workforce. At a time when the gap between available jobs and the skills of the workforce is large and only growing larger, we discussed workforce trends, the impact of AI on jobs of the future, and what's keeping people from accessing trade schools and pursuing alternative career paths, including public perception and an education system that's long been focused on college for all. The book makes a compelling case for the importance of skills-based education and training to America's competitiveness and provides specific recommendations for state and local leaders that want to bridge the skills gap. I hope you enjoy. Jason Altmire and Riley Burr, welcome to An Honorable Profession.
Thank you for having us.
Happy to be here.
Excited to dive in. I think you're making the rounds, which is awesome because you have this amazing very timely, I think, thought-provoking new book. And I want to read the title so I get it right. Trade Up: Why the Future Belongs to Skilled Trades and How Career Education is Transforming the Workforce. Really, honestly, timely. I learned a lot. Thank you for writing it, and excited to talk to you about it. I thought maybe I'd start with just defining the problem that you all are trying to address, this gap, the skills gap, the mismatch, if you will, between jobs and skills. I liked one of you called it in one of the things you wrote, the white collar unemployment and blue collar shortages problem. So maybe I'd love to hear from both of you kind of how you got into this work and what the problem you saw that you wanted to address with this book.
Riley and I work together at career education colleges and universities, and that is the national association that represents private trade schools and career colleges. And we travel all over the country, and I have visited over 200 trade schools. Riley's visited quite a number. And we hear all the time from employers that they can't find qualified workers to fill in-demand roles. And the book deals with the paradox of how is it possible that record numbers of college graduates cannot find jobs at the same moment record numbers of employers can't find qualified workers for jobs that are open. Yeah. How can both things be true at the same time? And then you have the issue of AI disruptions in the labor market. So Riley and I see this in the news every day. We see it firsthand in our travels and in dealing with our members. And we noticed that no one had done a book to put all of this together. We have a chapter on just what is it like to go to a trade school? What can you expect? What is the process before and after? What happens when you're there? What about the different fields that you can consider? Welding, truck driving, aviation technician, even healthcare programs like nursing and medical assistant. Depending on your career path, what can you expect your education to look like and what can you expect to happen after you graduate? So we put all of that in the book, but you hear every day about these workforce shortages and the skills gap that exists. And that's where Riley and I work together to kind of put it all in one place so that those interested in the topic can have all that information right at their fingertips.
Yeah, thank you. That's really super helpful context. I wonder, Riley, could you just give us a little bit of the sense of the scope of the problem? That, this is, I think people hear skills gap, but what are the types of industries that are going to have gaps, and and just kind of a general sense of the numbers.
There was a Lightcast study that found that American employers are listing 2.9 skilled trade jobs annually. On the training side, we have 1.25 million workers being trained, which is leaving a 1.7 million gap in the workforce shortage. So we need construction workers, we need electricians, we need linemen, plumbers, truckers, HVAC workers, shipbuilding. The numbers are really staggering, and I won't bore you with too many lists, but something that's particularly concerning is a quarter of the skilled trade workers are set to retire quite soon. We have a lot of baby boomers who are working in the trades right now, and they're set to retire, and we don't have enough young workers coming in to replace that gap. So the workforce shortage right now is concerning. The workforce shortage in 2030, in 2035 is a crisis. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I should have led off with the fact that I'm sitting here as the mother of two college students. So this is a particularly timely conversation in my own life to think about their futures. But maybe, Congressman, I'll go back to you. Just as we think about this, I'm excited that your book deals so much with solutions, and I want to get to that. But just back on one more question on kind of setting the context for the problem. You mentioned AI. What are your kind of projections or looking ahead? I mean, obviously we don't know where everything's headed, but what are you even seeing right now in terms of how AI is impacting this and what you think might happen in the future?
We have an entire section in the book talking about laying the groundwork in a way that puts it in historical perspective, that throughout history, not just American history, but human history, there have been changes in technology that have greatly disrupted the workforce. Think about the people who used to be paid to turn off the gas lamps on and off before there was electricity. They would just walk around the streets of a community. Think about the horse and buggy and all of the ecosystem that went into operating and the infrastructure needs and how you design cities based upon the expectation that would always be the way you transported yourselves. Then cars came along. So there's been huge disruptions. And the key to the AI disruption is using it to your advantage, using it to help you do the work that you do. And Riley can give you specific facts and data about jobs that are going to be disrupted and the percentages of tasks that are going to be automated and thus made obsolete. But we argue that the role for the trades expands because of AI, because AI is not going to come for the work that's being done. So you think about all those jobs that Riley just listed off, everything from high wire linemen to underwater construction and everything in between. Those blue collar jobs are going to survive, and they're going to be needed to build the infrastructure to power the AI revolution, the data centers, the semiconductor manufacturing, the ships, shipbuilding, nuclear, roads and bridges, all the things that are happening related to America's infrastructure. We don't have the workers to build out what is needed to carry forward with the AI revolution. So that's one thing. But then using AI to help supplement your work. It used to be if you're an HVAC technician, pick any of the trades, and you encounter a problem you've never seen before, you would Google it, and whatever comes up, and maybe you have a manual or some sort of handbook in your back pocket. Now you have every word that's ever been spoken on the topic at your fingertips through AI, and you can ask and say, "This is what I'm seeing," and it can give you advice. So I think rather than be a threat, AI is a huge opportunity for people going into the trades because it greatly expands the number of jobs that are needed, but it also helps you do your job better.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything to that since you got name checked on that one, Riley?
I would love to. So OpenAI said that in the next 5 years, they can use 20% of the current skilled trades workforce in the United States just to build their own data centers. And that's just one company. We need so many more skilled trade workers to contribute to this rising tide of technology. And it's beneficial to the workers as well. You know, the average construction worker makes $62,000 a year. The average data center worker makes $82,000 a year. So there's a premium price being paid to construct these data centers. And Jason had mentioned that we look a little bit about what jobs are going to be replaced. And Microsoft had released a report where they looked at the 40 jobs with the highest percentage of task replacement and the 40 jobs with the lowest percentage of task replacement. You look at that lowest percentage of task replacement, everything on that list are the trade careers that Jason and I are talking about. And so if students are in college or about to go to college and they're trying to think of, how can I get a career in these really uncertain times? It feels like the workforce is changing so quickly. It's looking at that task replacement and saying, a robot can't take my job yet. This is something where I can jump into this and I can work with my hands and I can have a purpose and I can actually enter a growing field because they need more workers like me.
Yeah. I was really interested in the fact that we think about barriers, like why has this happened? What is why is the gap persisting or growing, and what is stopping people from going into the trades jobs? And I was interested to see, I think in one of your op-eds, you wrote that, I remember when vocational education, when I was in high school, did have a little bit of a stigma attached to it, that maybe that wasn't, but it felt, I saw a survey you all quoted saying that that's actually, perceptions have changed. Students and parents generally think that that's a great career path, trades, but yet we're still not seeing the kids going into that. So what are you both pinpointing as like the barriers to getting more kids to go through into that path?
Something interesting about that survey that you mentioned is these students and parents all said, not all, the majority said that the trade careers were a great, honorable profession. However, when asked if they wanted it for their child or for themselves, so few of them said that it was a good career path. And
that's interesting.
The issue
that
we're
number,
having,
Riley, you'll remember that number was 94%. 94% of parents said that the trades were a good profession for somebody else's kid.
Oh, so interesting.
Only about 30% said it would be a viable career for their own children.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, and is it because for so long we've heard that, that the wage gap really has favored people with 4-year college degrees, and that is, it sounds like you're making the case that that's changing, but that maybe that the perception hasn't caught up with that. Is that part of the challenge?
Certainly. There's definitely a few things driving it. We saw that parents felt a lot more comfortable recommending a career path to their student or to their kids if they had done it themselves. And so if a parent got a 4-year degree, they might not feel comfortable suggesting that their child go to trade school because that's not something that they know how to give advice about. They don't know what that looks like. We also see that high school counselors aren't recommending trade school necessarily. It has become more and more in recent decades a backup option, something you can do if you can't quite cut it in a different career. And what we really looked at with this book is trying to show people that it can be just as viable of a career. It can be a way to own your own business. It can be a way to make 6 figures. It can be a way to minimize your student debt and not spend 4 years in school. There's an angle that you could be approaching this to say that these are a great career. This is a great first choice. And so I think that we're really suffering from, we promoted college for all for several decades. And the argument that we want to make is not that the 4-year degree is wrong or bad. We still need people going to get their bachelor's degree, but that doesn't need to be the only path. If someone feels better suited to a trade career, that should be treated with respect.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the Congressman. You mentioned the chapter about just introducing to someone who's reading the book about what it looks like these days to be in a trade school. I'd love you to talk a little bit about that. Like, what might surprise people about what kind of trade schools or career education looks like as opposed to a 4-year path.
I think one of the things that would be most surprising if people were to walk through and see the students, because it's always inspiring to see the faces of the students and their pride, but also folks would notice they're non-traditional students.
Hmm.
You have this idea when you're talking about higher education, these are 18-year-olds coming right out of high school. For a trade school, often these are people who've tried something else. These are single moms that are trying to make things better for their family. They're veterans returning to the workforce. They're people who've been downsized, maybe lost their job because of AI, just unhappy with their career trajectory, going through a divorce and need to get into the workforce, whatever it might be. You'll notice these are adult students for the most part, and they're non-traditional. And often they are coming from a socioeconomic background where they need help. So most of them are receiving financial assistance to pursue that education. So when you think about the experience of going to a trade school, figuring out how you're going to pay for it is a big issue. So having the assistance to be able to think through what are your options, what's the best program for you, and having the ability to kind of test things out and think about, do I want to be an electrician? Do I want to be a high wire lineman? Do I want to get into welding? These are decisions that are going to impact your career trajectory. And then the impact of employers. Almost all of these schools have employers on their advisory boards. They help them design curriculums. Frequently, the employers will donate resources and material that the students use. Sometimes they serve as adjunct faculty to instruct the students. But those curriculums are designed based upon the employer's needs. Where is the where's the workforce heading? What are the jobs that are available? And then how do you help those students get there? And for some, students, whatever reason, occasionally you'll have some that are just not prepared for the environment of you have to show up every day. You have to work. And if the seat is open, if it's the day you're in the classroom instead of in the shop, the campus president's going to call and say, hey, where were you today? I noticed that you weren't in class. Now, that doesn't happen in a 4-year university or community college for the most part, but at our trade schools, it does, because you miss it and you can't make it up that time. These are programs that operate on a tight deadline. You're not going to be studying Chaucer or learning poetry. You're going to be learning how to fix hydraulic systems on aircraft or do the high wire electrical work, whatever it might be. So it's very different, but you have to be ready for it as a student.
Yeah, I did take a whole class on Chaucer, by the way. I don't know if you usually look at my transcript. No, I'm just kidding. So the severity of the gap that you were talking about earlier, trade schools is a great one option. Have you also looked at things like apprenticeships, and even we've done a lot of work at NewDEAL with our leaders around the country thinking about remaking the high school experience in terms of thinking about certifications and other ways to demonstrate competency coming out of high school. So I'm wondering, in addition to this trade school piece, what other paths might exist to close this gap?
Apprenticeships are a big one. Go ahead, Riley. You go ahead.
Well, I was going to mention something that we wrote about was Father Judge High School, where they have a specific welding curriculum, and 100% of the graduating seniors got a job in welding, and they're graduating from high school, not college, not trade school. They got a job in welding that paid over $50,000 a year. And in a world where it's difficult for those with bachelor's degrees to get a job right now, that's huge. So we are seeing that there are some high schools that are doing their best to do this work, but it's tough when there's also a lot of CTE education being taken out of schools at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about apprenticeships?
Well, I'm just to follow on what Riley said. So you are seeing high schools get into it all over the country. Loudoun County, Virginia, there's a brand new trade school facility that they're doing. It's a high school. White Plains, New York, the school board just authorized clearing 75 acres to build a brand new vocational education sector school. And in Massachusetts, there are thousands of students on the waiting list for their career and technical ed programs. And you're seeing this all across the country. You're seeing employers train their own workers now. You see organizations like Lowe's just said they're going to give $250 million across the country to programs to upgrade facilities and provide greater access to training. So it's happening all across, and nothing gets talked about more or is more of a vital solution to the problem than apprenticeships, because so underutilized in this country. Registered apprenticeships run through the Department of Labor. There are currently only 700,000 registered apprentices in the country, and it's a 4 or 5 year program. So it takes a while to go through. It's not an immediate solution, but it's difficult for employers to set up the apprenticeship. You have to have a mentor there on site that's going to be distracted and lose some work productivity because they're working with the apprentice. You have to pay the apprentice. There's cost associated with that. And a lot of employers just don't want to deal with the bureaucratic red tape that it takes to originate the program and go through with the apprentice. So making it a lot easier for employers to register an apprenticeship, to afford the program. You can give tax credits and grants and support employers through intermediaries to help them work between schools and students, and there's an educational component. So it's a lot more complicated than it needs to be. And any discussion that you see about solutions to the skills gap is going to start with expanding access to apprenticeships.
It feels like there's countries that are doing it a lot better. We've got some friends in Switzerland today that were sending us some information about how well Switzerland's doing this. Is it mostly what you talked about, kind of the red tape, how hard it is? Because we do a pretty good job at internships, right, in a lot of companies. But at the apprenticeships, which I guess is, maybe the difference is paying them full wage as opposed to a stipend or something. What would you just double down on the red tape, or are there other things that people that want to do apprenticeships should be thinking about?
Apprenticeships work. I don't want to give you the impression that they're not working once you get into them. The issue is it's really hard to start one up. And intermediaries, Riley wrote our chapter on what foreign countries are doing, and we are so far behind what every other country in the world is doing with regard to on-the-job training, not called apprenticeships in every country, but the ability of students and workers to get out and get that hands-on experience. And you mentioned Switzerland. Riley talks about that in the book.
Yeah. What should we learn from Switzerland, Riley?
We've seen in some of the Central European countries, we looked at Switzerland, we looked at Germany, is apprenticeships are a default option. The majority of students are actually there's different track options in higher education, and one track involves apprenticeships and one track doesn't. More students are taking the apprenticeship track, and that's not just for blue collar careers, that's not just for skilled trades, it's for their work in general. So they're going into the workforce more prepared because they've been doing on the job training. There's often partnerships with that corporation that they're doing their apprenticeship with, and so they do know that they have a job set for them. And I think you mentioned internships are popular in this country. I think there is an element of a default option. I think that it's quite assumed that if you want to work at a certain company or in a certain field, you should get an internship. That's taught quite clearly even to high schoolers and early college students. I don't think that apprenticeships are being offered as a default option in the United States the same way they might be in Germany or Switzerland, because that's just not the infrastructure we have established yet. And so sort of moving towards making that a default option, moving towards taking away some of that red tape and making it easier for students to get that on-the-job experience while also still learning in the classroom, I think would be a great way to bridge that gap a bit.
Yeah. You talked about companies and what they can do and offering some of these apprenticeship programs and other things. Trade unions seem to be another big piece of this puzzle. Obviously, a lot of building trades represented by unions. Are they engaged in some of this? Is there any bright spots you'd point to or advice you have for how they might, how they're working with this?
Yeah, I'll just put it in perspective. Riley talked about Father Judge High School, which is in Philadelphia. So the high school welders. The Steam Fitters Union in Philadelphia in 2025 got 609 applicants for 85 spots to be apprentices. And I can guarantee you those 85 people are going to be excellent. They're going to go through that program. They're going to be well trained and they're going to do a great job. And it's going to take them 3 or 4 or 5 years. But when they're done, they're going to be really good. But what about the other 500 people? What happens to them? That's the issue. And that's where trade schools come in. That's where all of these other potential training opportunities come in, because not everybody is going to make it into the union apprenticeship. There's a long waiting list. It's very competitive, but everyone needs the opportunity to pursue a career in the trades.
Yeah. Well, and that leads me maybe to the thing I want to end on, which is to talk a little bit about some of the solutions. Obviously, in Honorable Profession, our podcast audience is a lot of state and local elected officials, state and local elected official staff. What are some of the things that you are advising policymakers to be thinking about in terms of opening up access, making these things more available, and creating more opportunities for this kind of education track?
One of the things I've been most gratified about with the book, which has been extremely well received, and maybe even more important than it's selling very well, is we've been getting calls from policymakers to, hey, come see us, sit down with us, talk about what the solutions are. And it all starts with apprenticeships, increasing the capacity, building an infrastructure where intermediaries can do a better match, and helping employers. But looking at the data and the disconnect that exists between the stakeholders, I think that is the top priority. If you were to pick one thing, wave your magic wand and get it done, is the Department of Labor, the Department of Education. They don't coordinate. They don't communicate with each other. There's very little data that's publicly available for families or individuals that are thinking about different career paths. Having some sort of statewide or even regional database that's going to show you where are the jobs, where is the growth expected to be, what is the educational pipeline it takes to get there, what can you expect to make from a financial perspective when you're done. You can't find that information now, at least not easily. So better coordination, breaking down the silos. And then we have a lot of recommendations regarding tax credits for employers to support their workers. You have health savings accounts that people are familiar with. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce advocates skilled savings accounts, so you can use tax-deferred money as an employee to upskill, to learn more and become better at what you're doing and better trained. The idea of these virtual transcripts, digital transcripts that you carry forward, not just your list of jobs, but all of your competencies, all of the certificates you've earned, everything that qualifies you to get out into the workforce. So having that be portable across employers is really important. And I don't know, Riley, if you want to add more, you have a lot as well.
Well, it's tough to add to that list. You said it really comprehensively. But I would say that in the book, we talk about solutions, but we also take a very honest look at the obstacles that are facing students that might want to get into the trades right now. And as much as policymakers can look at those obstacles and see what can maybe be peeled back, I've talked to leaders at trade schools, and they say that they are not allowed to showcase their school at high school fairs. They are not able to get connections with high school counselors. So that is limiting the information available to young people who might be really well suited to the trades. We see that the work and education preferences of Gen Z are incredibly well aligned with skilled trade careers. And if they aren't being allowed to access this information, we need to be taking those obstacles away every chance we get.
Yeah, I know I said that was the last question, but I lied because I want to talk about this 1 second because you mentioned it, the Gen Z and it was the Wall Street Journal, right, that coined the is it tool belt generation? Is that the term? So to add to your point, it sounds like it's not just the creating the opportunities, that there's really a demand. I mean, you were talking about the number of applicants you had for the steam fitters apprentice programs. I just want to underscore your point that essentially this new generation, these younger folks are saying, we want other options. Actually, we know college is expensive. We want, we're at NewDEAL, we're talking a lot about the cost of living and affordability crisis in this country, and that's one side of it, right? Is what do things cost? The other thing is how much are people making? What are their opportunities to be able to bridge that gap on the affordability? So I think this is actually not just a workforce issue, but it's also a cost of living affordability conversation and making sure that people have well-paying jobs. So why do you think that, what else would you say about why that change is happening with Gen Z and anything people should, again, particularly with policymakers in mind, anything that they could do to, respond to what Gen Zs want?
So there's a very popular misconception that Gen Z doesn't want to work. And we want to nip that in the bud and say that they want to work differently. They want purpose. They want flexibility. They want part-time hours if they choose. And they honestly don't want to make the mistakes that they saw the generation before them make. Millennials were one of the most educated generations, and yet they are struggling the most financially. So Gen Z sees this, and they have the option in front of them of, do I want to spend 4 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars on a degree that I'm not sure I want yet? Or do I want to go to a shorter trade school program? Do I want to get a certificate or an associate's degree and spend less time and less money and get really tangible skills that can translate to a flexible work environment? So they've seen the mistakes of the generation, or I shouldn't say the mistakes of the generation before them, because millennials were given all the information that would suggest this is a great career path and you should get a 4-year degree. But if we have an oversaturation of bachelor's degrees, no one else is doing the skilled trades work, and there's a huge opening. And something else is Gen Z has faced a lot of uncertainty in their lives. They have had the COVID pandemic, and now they have AI. They're scared of the stability of their jobs, and they are seeing that the skilled trades could be more insulated from the impacts of AI. They're seeing that this could be work that gives them a purpose without being at risk of being taken away.
Yeah, that's a really helpful. Congressman Altmire, you want to have the last word? Anything that you want to make sure that our listeners leave this conversation thinking about, talking about, doing?
I would say that the purpose of the book is to answer these questions, to have a single resource where if you want to know why the skills gap exists, you can find it. If you want to know the consequences, what the solutions are, and if you want to go down that road and look at that as a possible career for you or someone that you know, the book tells you how to do that and what you can expect. So that's what we had in mind in writing it. And we would be happy to talk with anyone who wants to further the conversation.
That's great. And your organization, one more time, particularly for policymakers who are looking for more information beyond the book, tell them how to find your organization.
Career Education Colleges and Universities. Our website is career.org, and the website for the book is tradeupbook.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for spending the time. It's a really thoughtful book. It's a really thoughtful conversation. And I know that our state and local leaders are constantly looking for ways to make sure that we're matching skills to jobs. And so I think they're going to be really interested in you and what you're saying. So appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having us.
An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. And because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars were used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.